An 11-year-old girl fighting a severe illness in the hospital left her parents torn between heartbreak and wonder as she vividly described her visions of heaven. As they sat by her bedside, powerless to change her fate, Ruby's words painted a picture of peace that brought both comfort and sorrow. This is the unforgettable story of Ruby's courage, her unshakable faith, and the enduring love that carried her family through their darkest moments. Stay tuned and let us know in the comments below where you are listening from. And if you are moved by this tale, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Ruby Simmons, an 11-year-old girl from Charlotte, North Carolina, was the kind of child who made an impression on everyone she met. Her sparkling hazel eyes were always full of curiosity, and her laugh, bright and infectious, could lift even the heaviest of spirits. Whether she was creating chalk masterpieces on the driveway or racing her cousins through the trails at Freedom Park, Ruby lived with a kind of unrestrained joy that her family cherished. But one autumn morning, things began to change. Ruby's energy, once boundless, seemed to drain overnight. She struggled to keep up with her friends during recess and needed frequent naps after school. Vanessa, her mother, noticed the pallor in Ruby's cheeks, the way her once vivid enthusiasm had dulled. "She's just going through a growth spurt," Eric, her father, had suggested, but Vanessa's instincts told her something was wrong. After weeks of tests and anxious waiting, the diagnosis came. Ruby had acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The words landed like a thunderclap in the doctor's office. Vanessa sat frozen, gripping Ruby's small hand, while Eric leaned forward, his voice shaking as he asked, "What's the prognosis? What do we do next?" The whirlwind that followed brought them to Levine Children's Hospital, a place they'd never imagined would become a second home. Ruby's parents spent countless days and nights by her side, their lives now revolving around doctor's appointments, chemotherapy sessions, and whispered prayers. Margaret, Ruby's grandmother, stepped in as their anchor. A retired schoolteacher with a calm demeanor and a heart full of love, she seemed to know just what to say, or not say, to steady the family when emotions ran high. Through it all, Ruby displayed a strength that belied her young age. "It's okay, Mom," she said one day, noticing Vanessa's tears as a nurse prepared her IV. "I'm tougher than I look." She grinned, flashing the mischievous smile that always melted Vanessa's heart. Ruby's sense of humor became her armor. She teased the nurses about their clunky sneakers and gave nicknames to the humming machines in her room. "That's beep beep," she said, pointing to the heart monitor, "and that one over there is the whiner. It sounds like a squeaky mouse." The staff adored her, often stopping by her room to check in, even when they weren't assigned to her care. On good days, Ruby turned her hospital room into a little oasis of creativity. With her sketchpad balanced on her lap, she drew her favorite animals: elephants with floppy ears, cats with swishy tails, and always a bird soaring high above the clouds. "That's me," she explained, pointing to the bird in one of her drawings. "Flying free, like I'm at the mountains." The Blue Ridge Mountains had become Ruby's dream destination. She'd learned about them in school and often talked about the lush trails and the way the mist hugged the peaks in the morning. "When I get better," she told her family, "we're going to hike up to the very top." "All of us. Even you, Grandma," Margaret chuckled, her eyes moist. "You'd better save me a good walking stick, Ruby." But the treatments were grueling, and the illness weighed heavily on Ruby's small body. The sparkle in her eyes would dim after particularly hard days, though she tried to hide her pain. She didn't want to worry her parents more than she already had. "I'm okay," she'd whisper, even when her voice was barely audible, her hands trembling from fatigue. Eric and Vanessa, desperate to keep Ruby's spirits high, brought pieces of home into her hospital room. Her favorite lavender blanket, the one that smelled faintly of their dog, Buddy, draped over her bed. A string of twinkling fairy lights framed the window, casting a warm glow in the evenings. Margaret arrived daily with her crossword puzzles and ruby-red nail polish, ready to paint her granddaughter's nails while chatting about their favorite books. Yet beneath the brave smiles and moments of levity, the family felt the weight of uncertainty. At night, when Ruby was asleep, Eric and Vanessa would sit by the hospital window, their hands clasped tightly. "I just want her to be okay," Vanessa would say, her voice breaking. Eric, struggling to find the right words, could only nod, his own tears falling silently. Despite the pain and fear, Ruby's spirit shone through. She wasn't just fighting for her own life. She was fighting to keep her family hopeful, to remind them of the joy they'd shared and the adventures they still dreamed of. Her strength became their beacon, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love and resilience could carry them forward. As the weeks stretched into months, Ruby's fragile body bore the weight of her illness, but her spirit seemed untouched by despair. On the contrary, there were moments when she appeared almost radiant, her hazel eyes reflecting an inner calm that her family couldn't quite explain. It was during one quiet evening, after a particularly grueling round of chemotherapy, that Ruby first mentioned the visions. Vanessa was sitting beside her bed, reading softly from one of Ruby's favorite books. The rhythmic beeping of the monitors filled the room as Ruby lay quietly, her face pale but serene. "Mama," Ruby whispered, her voice barely audible. Vanessa leaned in closer, brushing a strand of hair from Ruby's forehead. "What is it, sweetheart?" Ruby's eyes, heavy with fatigue, flickered open. "I see light." Vanessa frowned gently. "What kind of light, honey?" "It's like the sun," Ruby said, her lips curving into a faint smile, "but softer. And I hear music, beautiful music, like singing. But it's not from here." Vanessa's heart clenched. "What do you mean, Ruby?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ruby turned her head slightly, her gaze unfocused, as if she were looking far beyond the confines of her hospital room. "It feels like a dream," she murmured, "but I'm awake. I think it's heaven." The words hung in the air, heavy yet strangely comforting. Eric, who had been sitting silently by the window, turned sharply toward them. His eyes, red from lack of sleep, searched Ruby's face. "Heaven?" he asked, his voice cracking. Ruby nodded, her small, delicate fingers playing with the corner of her lavender blanket. "It feels warm and safe," she said softly. "And there are angels, Daddy. I think they're waiting for me." Eric's chest tightened. He stood and crossed the room, kneeling by Ruby's bedside. Taking her hand in his, he said, "Ruby, you're not going anywhere. Not now. We're going to get through this together." Ruby tilted her head toward him, her smile never wavering. "I know, Daddy," she said gently, "but it's okay if I do. It's beautiful there." Vanessa, fighting to hold back tears, gripped Ruby's other hand. "Ruby, listen to me. We love you so much. We're here with you, and we're going to keep fighting. Together." Ruby squeezed her mother's hand with what little strength she had left. "I love you too, Mama. I'm not scared, though. You don't have to be scared for me." Vanessa couldn't hold back her tears any longer. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to Ruby's. "You're so brave, my sweet girl," she whispered. "So brave." As Ruby drifted back to sleep, her breathing shallow but steady, Eric and Vanessa sat quietly by her side. Vanessa wiped her tears, but her thoughts raced. Could Ruby's visions really be glimpses of something beyond, or were they simply the imaginings of a tired mind? Either way, they brought her daughter peace, and for that, Vanessa was grateful. In the days that followed, Ruby's descriptions of her visions became more vivid. She spoke of meadows bathed in golden light and trees that sparkled as though each leaf held 1,000 tiny stars. "It's not like here," she explained one afternoon to her grandmother, Margaret, who was painting Ruby's nails. "It's so quiet, but not empty. It's like love is everywhere." Margaret paused mid-stroke, her own hands trembling slightly. "What do you see there, Ruby?" she asked softly. Ruby smiled. "I see people, Grandma. People I don't know, but they feel like family. And there are angels. They don't talk, but I know what they're saying. They're waiting for me." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. She placed a kiss on Ruby's forehead and whispered, "You're the bravest little girl I've ever known." That evening, Vanessa confided in Eric as they sat by Ruby's bedside. "Do you think she really sees heaven?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Eric, staring at the steady rise and fall of Ruby's chest, shook his head. "I don't know," he admitted, "but if she does, maybe it's not so bad. Maybe it's a gift, to help her not be afraid." Vanessa nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I wish we could go with her." Eric wrapped his arms around her, holding her as tightly as he dared. "We'll be with her, Vanessa," he said, his voice breaking. In her heart, always, the family's faith and hope became intertwined with Ruby's visions. Though they couldn't fully understand what she saw, her descriptions brought them a strange sense of peace, as if Ruby were leading them, gently toward acceptance. And through it all, Ruby continued to share her light with them. Her courage, a reminder that even in the face of the unknown, love was the strongest force of all. To distract Ruby from the grueling treatments, Eric and Vanessa filled her hospital room with reminders of home, her favorite stuffed animals, a jar of seashells from their last beach trip, and photos of Ruby laughing with her cousins at Freedom Park. They told stories about family vacations, Ruby's love of drawing, and her dream of hiking in the Blue Ridge Mountains. One day, Ruby looked up from her sketchbook. "Do you think there are mountains in heaven?" Eric knelt beside her. "I don't know, sweetheart. But if there are, they'd be as beautiful as you can imagine." Ruby's face lit up. "Then maybe I'll see them." Her words, innocent and hopeful, filled the room with an unspoken sadness. Margaret, sitting in the corner, silently prayed for strength to keep the family together. Ruby's health began to decline rapidly. Breathing became harder, and her moments of wakefulness grew shorter. Yet, she remained a source of strength for her family. One evening, as the sun set outside her hospital window, Ruby opened her eyes and whispered, "They're here." "Who's here, baby?" Vanessa asked, her voice trembling. "The angels," Ruby replied, a peaceful smile on her face. "They're so beautiful, Mama." They said, "I don't have to be afraid." Eric clutched Ruby's hand, tears streaming down his face. "We love you, Ruby. We'll always love you." "I know, Daddy," she said softly. "I'll always be with you, too." As her family surrounded her, Ruby's breathing slowed. "I see the meadow," she murmured. "It's so bright and so beautiful." In that moment, with her family's love encircling her, Ruby quietly slipped away. The days following Ruby's passing were a blur of grief and remembrance. Eric and Vanessa found solace in Ruby's courage and her visions of peace. Margaret, ever the family's pillar, reminded them that Ruby's love would always be with them. The Simmons family organized a memorial in Freedom Park where Ruby had spent so many happy days. Friends, family, and even hospital staff gathered to celebrate her life. A local artist painted a mural of Ruby surrounded by mountains and golden light, a tribute to her faith and her love for nature. Vanessa spoke during the service. "Ruby taught us that even in the darkest moments, there's beauty and light. She saw heaven, and she reminded us that love never truly ends." In the months that followed, Eric and Vanessa channeled their grief into action, creating a foundation in Ruby's name to support families of children with life-threatening illnesses. They shared Ruby's story with the Charlotte community, inspiring hope and compassion. Years later, Ruby's story continued to resonate. The foundation in her name grew, helping countless families and children. Eric and Vanessa, though forever marked by their loss, found joy in seeing Ruby's impact. On a quiet morning in Freedom Park, Vanessa sat on a bench near Ruby's mural, watching the sunrise. "I hope you can see this, Ruby," she whispered. "It's as beautiful as you imagined." And in her heart, she felt Ruby's presence, as vivid and warm as the sunlight streaming through the trees. Ruby's story is one of courage, faith, and the unbreakable bond of family in the face of unimaginable loss. Her visions of heaven brought her comfort in her final days, leaving her family, and all of us, wondering about the mysteries of life, love, and what lies beyond. What do you think about Ruby's story? Were her visions a glimpse into something greater, or perhaps her way of finding peace? And if you were in her parents' shoes, how would you cope with such a heartbreaking journey? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear how Ruby's story has touched your heart. Thank you for watching.